So thank you everyone for attending. My name is Michael Barra, and I am one of the 3 fellowships administrators in the Graduate Division Student Services Unit at UC Berkeley. As I had mentioned, this session is being recorded. Afterwards, we will be able to share this recording with the campus community. But first, we're going to make sure that it's closed captioning. If you are attending and you have special accommodations that we need to meet, please let us know, especially if it has a letter that details like what this special accommodation is. Please let us know so that we can make sure that you get access to this full webinar. The chat feature is disabled. So when we go into the Q&A section, or even if you have questions throughout this workshop, please use the Q&A function that is at the bottom of your Zoom window. And the last thing I will cover before diving into the introduction is for questions for eligibility, we will have to defer you to the NSF help desk, which is info@nsfgrfp.org, because they will be able to have the final say on whether or not you are eligible to apply for this cycle. With that being said, I'll go ahead and just start diving right into it. What I'll start off with is going over the handout that you all received this morning. Let me see. So today's workshop will follow the agenda. And what I specifically want to cover is the resources at the very back of it. Much of this is just guiding information to guide you as the applicant if you're looking for specific information. So, you know, you have the fast lane where you go to start the application, the program solicitation, the FAQs, and whatnot. And so this is where we provided a little bit more guidance for you if you're looking for review criteria, formatting questions, primary field selection, and details regarding the fellowship rules. The one resource that I do want to highlight is this additional NSF resource provided by one of our PhD students, Emily Cook. And I will, when you click on that link, you'll be taken to this page. And so this is a free resource that is available to you. It is not part of NSF and it's not part of Graduate Division. This is just an additional resource. And it's just feedback that was provided to Emily Cook and the agency that she works with about tips and tricks on going about the application process. So this is feedback from students. When you click on download, you know, the guide and the supplemental information, you'll be taken to this page, and it's just like a real quick survey that you will want to complete in order to gain access to this. As I had mentioned, this is not part of NSF, this is not part of Graduate Division, this is just an additional resource for you all to peruse through as you're going through the application process. Sorry, I know I'm going in and out. And so with that being said, we have a great panel for you. We have 5 current fellows. 3 of them are recent awardees, so they were awarded this last application cycle. So they have that freshness, that wide-eyed and bushy-tailed experience of going through the application process. But we also have one 2018 and one 2019 resource available to you. And of course, we have Fiona Doyle here with us, who is going to be able to provide you with that faculty review perspective. And with that being said, I will now hand it off to Alexander to begin the panel. There you go, Alexander.
Thank you, Michael. My name is Alexander Alvara, and I was one of the 2019 NSF GRFP winners. My major is mechanical engineering. I'm in the PhD program here at UC Berkeley. And I think that just to give a little bit of advice from the NSF, that some things I wish I knew ahead of time would be get a hold of your letter writers very early as you can, and speak with them. Sit down, well, maybe not sit down with them anymore, Zoom with them, and discuss your future, what you think your future looks like. Let them see a little bit of yourself and let them understand why you want to do this. It'll go a long way in the letter of recommendation for them to be able to speak on a personal note. Additionally, let them understand your future goals for research. If they don't know this, it's going to be really hard for them to speak on your future and how they perceive it. After that, I would definitely say in preparation for this, it would be really good to get together a short packet. And the reason why I say this is because it might help you to further organize the deadline. And this could be just an Excel sheet. This could just be like a document that you create in Google Docs or something. And what it is kind of a timeline of the fellowships that you're looking forward to, the deadlines therein, and include in there a little bit of lead time, a little bit of extra time, so you can get a hold of the people, all the people that are going to vouch for you, your letter writers, your mentors who are reviewing your essays. Put in there little notes for yourself that help you understand, okay, I need to have a certain number of draft edits before this date. So that way I give myself enough time to fill out the application. And then I guess the last thing I would go ahead and say is something I didn't figure out the first time. So I applied 3 times for the NSF. Once as an undergrad, once after doing an abroad study in Canada, and then once as a grad student. And something I guess I didn't learn until the very last time was to get edits, get as many edits as you can, and try to get perspectives from people who are not in your field. And the reason why I say this is because the reviewers are not necessarily going to be in your field. The reviewers are going to be people who are from various fields and who may or may not know your research topic. So knowing how much jargon to include versus how much jargon not to include is kind of important, kind of a delicate balance, I would say. And so now I think I'll turn over to Isabel Serrano. Isabel?
Hi. So my name is Isabel, and I'm a 3rd year in the computational biology program, and I'm a 2020 NSF fellowship recipient. And so I guess like the main thing that I wanted to tackle was, I think a big question is, how do I get started? And I remember that was the daunting thing for me when I was approaching writing the research proposal and the personal statement. And so I think both can be condensed down into the fact that they're both stories. I think the science proposal is a story of your science, and kind of building off of what Alexander said, there are going to be reviewers that are not exactly in your field. So you don't want to get too technical, or at least I avoided getting too technical, and it's more about the science story that you're saying, highlighting the questions that you're asking, the contributions that you'll be making to your field. And I think really approaching it in a matter of like, I will address this question by this technique, but really putting forth like what the science story is. And at least in telling the science story, what I think worked really well for me was spending a lot of time on the outline itself, like making sure that you really thought about the science and really thought about what weaknesses there may be in what you're thinking of, because that'll be something that your reviewers want to know, that you've thought about what the weaknesses and shortcomings can be, and that you've either addressed how you will handle it or addressed how it may not affect another aim, and you could continue telling the science story. The second story you'll be telling is the story of you as a scientist. And I think for the personal statement, you have 3 pages and a lot of different questions to answer that include your academic journey and your personal journey and your future goals, that it kind of seems really open-ended. And the way that I kind of reworded this question for myself is kind of like, what is your advocacy platform as a scientist, and how have all your experiences come together to shape that? And I think if you can use this as a reflective exercise, you'll put out a statement that's genuine to you. So even if you include something that's kind of cheesy or generic, it'll come across as genuine because you've really shown how you've built that platform. So I guess my big advice for the personal statement is to really think about that question, like what matters to you, how has it come to matter to you, and how are you going to continue to advocate what interests you as a scientist. I think more concretely for the personal statement, last year when I came to this panel, something that I think was really useful was hearing that the reviewers don't want you to be generic. They want to know that you've done your research. So include statistics of like your field, include statistics of the institutions that you're at. Like this information's out there, like do the work to know what the landscape looks like in the fields that you're working in. And also look at the resources that are available to you. Like Berkeley has a lot of outreach resources. How can you be a part of those and build off of those instead of just pitching kind of like a very big dream idea that you can get to eventually, but they want to see that you can also have tangible, like immediate goals that you're going to be able to address. And I think making STEM more diverse and inclusive. And so I think those are my two, my overarching kind of advice for both the science proposal and the personal statement is to treat them both as stories and really think about the main message you want to send in both essays. And so with that, I'll hand it off to Willa.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Willa. I'm a PhD candidate in psychology and cognitive neuroscience. And so I actually applied to the NSF twice. So I applied once as a research assistant before I started grad school, and then once in my second year. So I can speak to both, although obviously more successfully probably to the second year one. So I guess my tips are, well, I second everything that's been said so far. And in line with that, I think especially in line with what Isabel was talking about with picking things you're genuinely, things that you're genuinely able to do and you have resources to do, I think you should also pick something that you're excited about. This is a great grant where you don't have to necessarily do every aspect of your project. You don't have to do everything, but they are looking for something that seems innovative and something that seems exciting and something that you can do. And I think with this idea of like having a story, if it's something that you're really interested in, that's going to come through. And that's true for the broader impacts as well. Pick things you care about. And I think that, again, it will sound much more honest and it will come through. Plus, then you actually get to spend time thinking about something you're excited about. In line with that, sorry, my cat just jumped on my lap. In line with that, I think you should start thinking about that early. People told me when I came to this to start writing early, and I'm someone who I know myself, I do everything down to the wire, I do everything last minute. Even if that is you, not that I recommend that, I think you should at least giving yourself time to really think through these ideas, and then more importantly, also talk about your research idea once you have one that you're excited about with your advisor or your postdoc or whoever's supervising you, because you can have a great idea, but crafting it into something that is a feasible project and writing it as a grant is an art. There's like a style to that, and it's different than any other writing I'd done before. And so sitting down and starting early on, talking to my advisors and be like, this is what I'm interested in, this is what I'm excited about, how do we package this so it comes through, was invaluable. And so even if you're rotating and you feel like it's not your advisor and you don't want to bug them, most people are more than happy to sit down with you, and you should get as much advice as you can. Also, you should reach out to people in your department, and most people who've done the NSF will be, especially if they've gotten it, will be happy to share their materials with you. And so I think reading a lot of grants and reading as many as you can to get a feel for how people are framing it, how they're writing this story is incredibly important. And then, yeah, once you've written it, get feedback, send it out to people, even if you're shy about your writing or your personal statement, send it out to a bunch of people who are outside of your field. Make sure even if they don't understand all the details that they get the gist of it. And then I found it was really helpful for my personal statement to actually send it to like friends and family members because they know you and they can again help you sort of be like, is this a story? Is this a framework that makes sense? So yeah, so have a lot of people read it and talk about your project with, I think, with as many people as possible. And then also just, I wanted to finish with don't panic. I think everyone's applying for it at the same time and it gets very stressful, but at the end of the day, it's a grant. And if it's funded, that's amazing. And if it's not, there are a lot more you can fund. This is not a reflection of you as a scientist. So do your best. And then if not, there's a ton of other resources out there. Oh, now I'm going to hand it over to Alvin.
Cool. So I'm going to sort of divide my tips into, actually, I should probably introduce myself first. So my name is Alvin. I'm a third-year grad student in the CS department here, and I got the NSF in 2018. And so I'm currently also going through another round of fellowship apps because fellowship lasts 3 years max, and I'm sure you all know that. So it's time for me to move on and find the next big thing. But so what are some things that I've sort of gone through looking at for a fresh new round of tips as well. And so this is sort of what I've gotten, what I'm applying, and also what I use in the NSF application. So the first thing is that the personal statement should sound like this fellowship is your destiny. Like everything in your life has led up to this moment. Obviously, don't include things like, oh, when I was 8 years old, I ran a science experiment on batteries and how long they lasted. You know, this should be like in undergrad, I participated. I volunteered for this, you know, for the suicide hotline. I, you know, also did some research in this area. I got some awards in this, you know, sort of all those experiences over a sequence of years should lead up to this, you know, final mission of accessibility, for example. Right? So what I've been told is that you should craft this to sound like it's your destiny. The second thing is in your research statement, be concrete, show numbers. How many experiments did you run? What was the improvement that you got? These are very concrete items that no one can really dispute with you about or need expertise in your area to understand. And I know Willa and Isabel both mentioned this, doing a pretty thorough lit review. I'm sure all the grad students understand this. And for the undergrads, this is even more so important. Show that you know the field so that someone in the field could look at this and say, this makes sense. Right? And someone outside the field could read it and understand just the intuitions that you provided. And then the last piece of advice for the research statement is just, if you're an undergrad, send it to a grad student and have the grad student evaluate for you sort of how reasonable this proposal sounds. And then finally, for the not personal statement, the plan. So for the research plan, I would say your goal is to demonstrate research expertise. I do want to distinguish that from technical expertise. It's not how much, again, I think Isabel said this, it's not about how much like jargon you know. It's more of you understand that each of these research ideas has an intuition for why it'll work. And that intuition should be, you know, rock solid. Yeah. And then finally, this is sort of outside of the two pieces of writing, and just to second what Alexander had said, making a spreadsheet with deadlines, that's incredibly helpful. And then also for getting recommendations from professors, there is a website called Interfolio, which will, it functions like the old campus letter service, which was deprecated last year, where the professor just submits your letter of rec to one website, and then humans working at that or for that website will automatically send the letter of rec to all the applications for you. So professors love this because it's no work for them pretty much. And now I want to pass it on to the person with the great videography skills, Reed.
Thank you. My name is Reed. I'm a first-year grad student first-year PhD student in the material science and engineering department. So I applied during my senior year of undergrad this past fall. So yeah, my advice will be significantly less structured, but I think the best piece of advice I applied when applying, or I received when applying, was that in this process, they're not funding the research, they're funding you as a researcher. So as you're writing everything, just remember to talk about yourself. And yeah, so that's very easily applicable to the personal statement. It's supposed to be all about you. But then in your research statement, make sure you're not just describing the research. Also mention why you have a good background for this, what skills you have that will help you be successful in this research, and why they should fund you to do this research, or in a lot of cases end up not doing this research at all because you're not going to, I am certainly not doing the research that I discussed in my graduate research plan, just staying in the same field. After that, so like everyone said, definitely have a variety of people read your statement. One thing that I found super helpful was I was lucky enough to have access to past successful applications, and reading those was incredibly helpful for me, especially getting started. I had absolutely no idea where to start, and just seeing the structure and flow and formatting of some successful applications was super helpful. Other things, yeah, again, ask your recommenders early for letters, and then don't be worried about bugging them repeatedly to actually submit your letter. Every time I sent another email, I felt guilty about it and had to remind myself, like, no, this isn't particularly hard for them. They just need to remember to do it. And I think you have up to 5 recommenders and they only use 3 or something. Don't quote me on that, but definitely ask for 5 recommenders. I was unfortunate enough to, one of my recommenders never actually submitted their letter, which was quite stressful to me, but it worked out just fine because there were 2 extras and I didn't need that one. So yeah, recommendations are important. I think that's about all that I have. So I will hand it off to Professor Fiona Doyle.
Muted.
I need to unmute myself. Hi, everybody. So nice to hear from our panelists who really embody my opinion that folks who are successful in getting these awards are incredible, and I congratulate all of them. And it's also great to be talking to so many people who are interested in applying for this fellowship. It's prestigious, it's competitive, but you aren't going to get it if you don't apply. And I'm really pleased that you're taking the first step, which is to get as much information as possible. By way of background, I am a professor emerita in material science and engineering. That's a fancy way of saying that I'm retired. In the past, I have served as a reviewer in the material science category for this award. And then this spring, I was a reviewer for the civil and environmental engineering competition. So that really underscores the amazing advice that some of our fellows have given you, which is that it's really important to avoid jargon. In a broader sense, I've always emphasized to my students that the way to be reviewed well is to ensure that your reviewers understand you. So if you write anything that is so full of jargon that the reviewers feel stupid and ignorant, subconsciously, and this is Willa's area of expertise, the psychology, they're kind of not going to like you because you made them feel stupid. Whereas in contrast, if you keep them coming along with you and they understand what you're talking about, then they feel smart. And so subconsciously, they're just going to be predisposed to actually like what it is that you're doing. So keep that piece of psychology in mind. Also, what's really important to understand, and the students have mentioned this, this is not a research proposal. You are being evaluated on your potential to do creative research and on the potential for that research and you as an educated individual to benefit society. So the research proposal, and Reid spoke about this, he's not doing what he proposed to do. The research proposal is a vehicle for you to communicate your potential to identify a problem, having read the literature, assessed where the gaps are, assessed where the uncertainties are, devise a strategy to resolve the gaps or the uncertainties, and put together a credible plan for a doable plan for addressing this. I've seen many applications that were not evaluated well because the research proposals were just unrealistically ambitious. They were basically outlining what would be sort of, if not a lifetime's work, at least a decade of research, rather than a PhD proposal. So it's better to be good but realistic than to be overly ambitious. The advice that people have said about getting feedback from people is really important. And I'll just say, from the perspective of having been a research advisor, your research advisor has a huge vested interest in your being successful. This is for people who are already grad students, because if you get this award, your research advisor doesn't have to worry about finding support for you for a few years. So do not hesitate to ask him or her for a lot of input and help, because you're really doing them a favor by trying to be as competitive as possible. Other comments that I wanted to make is, because the reviewers are asked to evaluate your potential, you should be thinking about putting together a proposal that shows who you are. And this is, it's been said before, but we want to see the person behind the grades, the research proposal, and the academic achievement. And this comes through not just from your actual written submission, but also from your choice of who's writing references for you. Do not go to the professor who gave you an A+ in a class that had 500 people in it, because really all they're going to be able to say about you is that you're a good student and you got an A+ in their class. You want to go to people whose office hours you have attended, who know you in some capacity and can provide insight into you as a person, your curiosity, your enthusiasm. You want people who can write to your strengths, but also if you know that you have weaknesses. For example, there was a semester when your grades were terrible because these days it might have been because you'd succumbed to COVID, but you know, something else was going on with you. If somebody knows that and can document it, then that's actually really important, because then the reviewers know that there's a reason why your grades tanked in a particular semester. And that's more valuable than hearing from somebody who's just seen your brilliant academic performance. You know, reviewers aren't fazed at all with a semester of bad grades if there's a reason, you know, for them, and we can see that you've had many semesters where you had great grades. And with that, I think that I'll probably stop and then chime in on questions.
Yeah, I think Alexander wanted to share one quick resource that he forgot to mention.
Right. Something I completely forgot to mention that I wish I knew my first year, and to be honest, the second year and the third year. I knew about it the third year. Anyways, the point is, it's Alex Lyon's NSF GRFP website and repository. Essentially, it's a storehouse of a lot of winning essays that have gone over, that people have submitted to basically Alex Lang's website. And so they're all available for free, available for your review. So feel free to look at after the Q&A.
Thank you, Alexander. Professor Doyle, there was one question for you. Does lecturer versus tenor faculty letters matter?
I would say not, with the caveat that ideally you will have somebody who has a research background. Who, it doesn't have to be exclusively people who have research backgrounds, but because the reviewers are asked to evaluate your potential for research, you want to have somebody who can speak to that. But if there's a lecturer who knows you well and can write an authentic letter that gives the reviewers insight into another facet of you, of who you are, that wouldn't be covered by other letter writers, then that would be fantastic and much more valuable than a letter from a tenured faculty member who just doesn't really know you that well.
Isabel, there was a question directed to you from an attendee that said, what kind of statistics were you referring to when you were discussing the proposals?
So I was referring to kind of addressing the broader impact section of the personal statement, where the NSF is interested in seeing how you will help their goals in making STEM fields more diverse and inclusive. So in reference to that, I was kind of trying to make the point of not just making generic statements, or we all know kind of what trends are prevalent in academia, but really doing the research in terms of like, at the institutions that you're looking to be at, or institutions that you were, what are the statistics looking like in the field? So for my statement, I remember looking at Berkeley's College of Engineering demographics, looking at retention rates, looking at my undergrad retention rates and first generation statistics, kind of looked through a book to see generally what were the trends for like first generation students. I think doing the work in being aware and educated about what the trends are, kind of let the committee or your reviewers know that you are aware of what is occurring in STEM fields, and really thinking about how you as a scientist and on your platform can go to make your institution and place more diverse. And kind of to go along with that, like my advocacy platform was kind of like making science more equitable. And so that's why I was looking at these kind of statistics in my personal statement.
And if I could just chime in from a reviewer perspective, what Isabel just said, that would show me that she is a great researcher. She went in and did the research that is relevant to the broader impact statement. So even though that is not her primary area of research, it shows me that she's got the curiosity and the drive and the interest to track down relevant resources and do the analysis to actually answer a research question.
Can I add to that as well? I didn't actually, I don't know if I included specific stats, although now I'm thinking that I should have, but one of the things that the reviewers commented for me, so a lot of my broader impact of my personal statement sort of area was about education and advancing education for STEM education, especially for underrepresented groups. And one of the things that they said that they liked was the sort of specific examples. So things that I had done before that were relevant for that. And then also, again, even if I didn't give specific stats, giving specific organizations and resources on campus that I could be a part of and then link together. So I think the specificity there is super helpful. And again, it makes it seem less like a generic thing that you're just throwing into the bottom.
Thank you. This is to everyone, especially as applicants and, Fiona Doyle as the reviewer. Do applicants have to mention professors that they're planning on working with within their research plan?
So I would say that if you are already a graduate student and you're planning to continue in the same institution, the reviewers would expect you to have already got started on your research and kind of have a good idea and support of an individual there. There may be some extenuating circumstances, but if you don't have an individual lined up, I would recommend that you explain why. In the case of undergraduate applicants, and this comes up a lot, there's actual sometimes concern on the part of reviewers, because if the sort of research goals and proposals are completely contingent upon the applicant being admitted to a particular school that they have not yet been admitted to when we do our work, we wonder, well, if this award is made, is the winner going to actually be able to conduct the research? So you need to, I think the idea of sort of talking generically about some of the institutions to which you're applying is probably the safest approach.
Oh, I'm not muted, sorry. I wanted to make sure. There was a question that says, can you only apply to one subject? Let's say if your project is interdisciplinary and falls under two focuses.
So I remember last year, one of the panel members suggested that if you have an interdisciplinary project, stick with one subject area because it makes the reviewing more cohesive. But I don't know if anyone else has any different advice. I kind of went with sticking to one subject area.
All right. And so I have heard similar information. Just to answer about the interdisciplinary, in the actual portal, you can choose a percent that your application applies to a certain major, and a percent that it applies to another major. So you can have interdisciplinary, and I would second what Isabel said. In my first one, I thought, oh, I'm going to put all the things that it's a part of. And all that told me was that professionals and academics and experts in completely different fields were going to evaluate my research proposal and my personal statement. So I was going to get very many perspectives on what my research should look like. And that's kind of what was reflected in my review. I got a lot of kind of differing feedback. And after that, I changed it to be one major, one specific field, and just acknowledged that some of the work I was doing was also in other fields in the actual essay.
And I would second that, because NSF is going to put you into a review panel, and you will be assigned to a few reviewers, and sort of you don't want to make it difficult for NSF to try and review you. And so much research is interdisciplinary these days that reviewers, will consider the merits of things that might be outside of the mainstream of their discipline.
Thank you. This is a long question, so if I stutter, my apologies. And if you need me to repeat it, I think just let me know. If you are a graduate student doing lab rotations, should you ask all your potential rotation advisors to review your NSF? Should your fall rotation advisor be the one to potentially? Should your fall rotation advisor be the one to potentially write a letter for you? Not sure how to navigate this as a PhD student who will not be in the dissertation lab until next fall.
So are there any students who are actually doing rotations? Because I work in a field where we don't do rotations.
So I didn't rotate, but I am in a lab that intersects with neuroscience, so a bunch of our grad students rotate, so I could jump on this, but also please someone else, if you've done this, feel free to interrupt. I have an opinion that you should just always talk to your advisor first and see what they think, because I've also heard that it's worth having a discussion with potential advisors of, do you want to apply during your first year, or if you have a better idea of the lab you want to be in, there's some merit to waiting until your second year when you know your lab. But I don't think there's anything wrong with talking to your advisor, especially if the topic you're interested in is close to some of their research and getting their advice. And then again, if you've been working in their lab, so I don't know how frequently you do rotations, but if you've been in their lab for like 10 weeks and you think that they'd be a valuable letter recommender, I don't think it's a problem to ask them. But again, it depends on how your rotation is going and how you feel comfortable, but I don't think there's any problem bringing it up with them and sort of seeing where they fall. And they've also probably had this situation before, so they might have some advice on it.
And I would certainly say that psychology is important here. So if you aren't getting on with the person with whom you're doing a lab rotation, and it's clear from your application that you don't want to work in their area, they're probably not going to be as vested or as positive as if you're getting on like a house on fire and you're proposing to work in their field. So if you still have to work in the lab of the field that you think you're going to be gravitating towards, reach out to that person, even if you haven't done the lab rotation. But you might consider waiting another year when you actually have had an opportunity to work more in the field that you want to go into.
Yeah, to add to that, my program does rotations, and I waited until my second year to apply for the sake of kind of knowing a little bit more what project and what field I was really going to be interested in. And if it helps, it was a great way to also prep for qualifying exams, because it was the skeleton of my qualifying exam proposal. But if you really want to apply this year, I think what some friends have done is essentially kind of try and pick which advisor they can kind of see themselves staying with, and kind of working with that advisor specifically informing their proposal. And I think it's helpful in kind of keeping your own mind in terms of this is the project I'll be working on, let me pitch the scientific proposal with this mindset that this will be the project that I'm working on. Even if it doesn't work out that way, it kind of just fools you into thinking you're doing it while you're writing it.
Awesome, thank you for that. And I do know there may be students that are more in the social sciences that are on the call. I know that we're a little bit more STEM focused per se on this panel, but if you have questions of getting connected with departments or students within more social science departments, feel free to email us at gradfail@berkeley.edu, and we'll definitely connect you with those resources as well. There's two questions that are very similar, so I'm going to try to lump them together. Is it okay to have letters from the industry? And is this better than having a letter from a professor who doesn't know you well? And are professors strictly an optimal recommender for this fellowship?
So I'll take that one. And again, it goes back to keeping in mind what question the reviewers are being asked, which is to assess your potential for success in research and to contribute to society. And you want your references to be able to speak to one or both of those. So if you have done an internship in industry where you were doing research, and somebody was working with you and can assess your research potential, then they're a great letter writer. If you have been engaged in some really extraordinary extracurricular activity, for example, you took a year off and you worked for an NGO, and somebody, you know, can speak to your dedication and the skills that you bring to a facet of your proposal on broader impact, then that person would be a good letter writer. But you do need to have at least one letter writer who can provide insight into what your potential is for doing academic research, because that is what NSF is going to fund people to be doing.
Thank you. So this is a question to everyone. What have you found is best and most creative way to address the intellectual merit and broader impacts of your personal statement?
I found that it looked really nice when I was able to tie them together a little bit. So the things I discuss in my broader impact statement, I showed that I had the background to be able to do those things, and the knowledge and the so that's not particularly specific. So anything that I proposed I might like to do in my broader impacts, I made sure that there was a part in my intellectual merit that showed that I would know what I was talking about when I went and tried to do that.
Sorry.
No, Isabel, go first.
Kind of building off of what Reed said about tying them together, I think what kind of helped me, and I kind of noticed this in one of the grants that I had gotten the chance to read, is that I kind of included like an introduction that was kind of the teaser to what I'd be talking about, where it was like a very concise paragraph where I kind of said like, this is my upbringing, this is what I'm interested in. And in the rest of my statement, I'm going to tell you how I got to the kind of advocacy platform that I want based off of my academic and personal experiences. So I think that kind of sets the stage for like making it cohesive and allows you to form like kind of making a thesis sentence that like brings us back to like writing kind of lessons. I think having that really strong thesis statement will help you kind of set the tone for your personal statement in addressing your broader and intellectual impacts. And additionally, I like the idea of like, show what you've done, not say what you've done. So make specific examples that show like, this is how I've shown that I'm like academically capable of doing something, but also that like you've already thought about like the broader impacts that you're talking about.
And so I can see why you were successful, Isabel, because I always tell my students when writing and giving presentations that, you know, that you're not doing a detective novel where you want to create suspense. You really have to draw in your audience, and in a technical sense, you do this by telling them what you're going to tell them, then telling them what you've told them. And you want to do this in an interesting way, because the reviewers, if I remember correctly this spring, I had to read 30 applications, and that's a lot. And you want to make it interesting so that the reviewer doesn't fall asleep and just forget who you are. And in answer to the question that was posed about kind of what's the most important, I mean, my response is exasperating, which is that the reviewers are told to evaluate the applications holistically, which means that there is no single place where, you know, the magic bullet is placed. You really have to be presenting a whole package that tells the reviewer who you are, what your potential for research is, and what your potential to contribute to society is. So since the reviewer has to read the whole thing, if you can sprinkle little tantalizing breadcrumbs throughout so that they can see and keep on answering that question, then you keep them, keep their attention.
Yeah, I think I want to add on to that and say it's not that you shouldn't be creative, you should be creative, but there's also, you want to be direct. So you want to sprinkle it throughout because they have to read the whole proposal, but you also don't want it, as you said, hidden. You don't, this is not a detective novel. And if you read grants, people bold things, they highlight things, and they use very direct statements. So read the NSF page, and if it says the intellectual merit should be, make sure you have a sentence that says the intellectual merit of this work is this, and then this will lead into some broader impact that is, and just make it really direct. And I actually use bolding and underline tastefully. But so, and then I went back to my statements at the end, and if I just read the bold and the underlined pieces, did I get the gist of the proposal, and did I leave knowing the merits and the broader impacts, and does that just all come through? Because the reviewers are going to be reading a ton of these, and they're looking to check these boxes. So I think you want to be more direct instead of just like creative or interesting with it.
And so much of this advice is going to be important, or is already important, for your writing research results and papers, for your dissertation, for your qualifying exams, and if you choose to go into a research field, for your writing future proposals. So it's not a one-off. It's really worth heeding the great advice that's coming from people.
There's a fellowship question that I'm just gonna ask or answer, since there's probably, it's application season, so students are definitely curious about this. So, you know, if you have, or if you're currently a PhD student and you're on a multi-year fellowship, or if you're on a grant, and you're concerned of whether or not you can apply to the NSF, so long as you meet the criteria for eligibility, you are eligible to apply. It's just mapping out how, you know, if you're in year one, okay, so what's year two of funding? Are you going to be on NSF, or are you going to be on the multi-year? And you have the opportunity to defer these fellowships before they expire. So you'll definitely want to work with your advisor as well as your departmental staff to make sure that there's a clear outline for, you know, years 1 through 6, 1 through 8 of like each year you're being funded by XYZ funding opportunity. But yes, so long as you meet the criteria to apply, you should apply. There's a question, is there an optimized time to apply at, is there an optimized time to apply after my first year of grad school, or right as I'm starting?
I would say if you're eligible now, then I would be inclined to apply if you feel that you can put together a credible application, because Michael will bear me out that they keep changing the rules on eligibility. And you don't want to be in the position of having, you know, put it off to a third year, only to find that they declare that third years can't apply anymore.
Yeah, they can't.
Sorry?
They can't. They
used to be able to.
I know. I guess, so kind of tying into one of the other questions I see here, I think this is very pertinent to the situation that everyone's experiencing now, the COVID situation, how NSF has steered their focus to AI. I think this ties in very much to that question. And I was wondering, I'm even wondering, Dr. Doyle, Professor Doyle, if you'd be inclined to elaborate on it with the AI switch in mind.
Sorry, where was this? What was this question?
Sorry, I'll read it.
It's Oh yeah, go for it.
Oh no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I guess the NSF solicitation mentions a focus on AI and other computational sciences work for this fiscal year. Would adding a plan to collaborate with researchers in those fields be a good idea? I'm assuming that the student or the student or the attendee is not in the AI or computational science field.
Well, so I'm going to punt because I would really want to read the wording very carefully a few times. So it would depend upon whether they're funding exclusively in this area or whether they're going to indicate that there's going to be a preference in that area. I can tell you that I was invited to serve on the panel for next year, and I know diddly squat about AI. So I know that they're going to be anticipating some that they presumably consider me to be competent to review, because otherwise, why are they bothering? But in a broader, more general sense, it's always good, and sort of professors and professional researchers play this game all the time. There are certain fields that are fashionable and a high priority at a particular point in time. And it's really helpful to learn how to view your own research interests through the lens of what's considered important at the time. And that is a skill that I really recommend you acquire. And it's a skill that will help you in getting jobs, even if they're not research jobs. You kind of have to understand how relevant what you're doing is to whatever you're looking at.
So the next question, as a first-year PhD student, is it fine to include more letters relating to your undergraduate research experience?
That seems fine to me. Your letters aren't about your research experience. The letters are about you. And at least as long as those letters are of someone who's known you in the past year or two or three, it's just important to have someone who knows who you are.
Yeah, I second Reed's comment. I think 2 of my 3 letters were from experiences in undergrad where I knew those PIs knew me as like a researcher, more so than like rotations that I did in my first year.
And I'd go one step further and encourage you to include somebody who knew you as an undergraduate. I've reviewed quite a lot of applications from first-year PhD students where the folks at the new institution basically don't know them. And so their letters aren't that helpful to the reviewers in terms of revealing who they are. So people who know you well from your undergraduate institution, I think will be happy to dust off the letters that they wrote to get you into grad school and modify them and tweak them for this purpose. It's kind of what you do as a professor. You always feel kind of warm and fuzzy about helping your former students. Michael, you're on mute.
I'm muted. I just did that thing. This is more of an eligibility question, but I do want to just say it out loud. I'm currently in my first year of a 2-year master's program with the intention to go on to the PhD. I've read that you can only apply once. Should I apply as a master's student or wait until my first year of PhD? So what I would say is read the current eligibility, because there is a stipulation for those students that are either currently completing a master's or have already completed a master's. And I believe the stipulation is that if you have to have had 2 years 2-year gap between when you finished your master's program to beginning your PhD program in order to be eligible. And you cannot be enrolled in a PhD program after that 2-year period. So as Fiona had mentioned, like read the eligibility, because every year it's changing, and you don't want, if you meet the eligibility right now, you should move forward with applying. You don't want to wait until the following year and then they change the the NSF eligibility and like you miss out on your opportunity. There's a question about, can you get a reference from a postdoc you've worked with extensively, or should it definitely come from a professor?
At the risk of sounding like a broken record, sort of, if the postdoc knows you well and you know that you're comfortable that they actually have the skills to write a well-composed letter, and some of that would depend upon, you know, their writing ability, then by all means, but I would only use one from a postdoc.
I also got the advice when I was applying in the first time around that if you wanted a postdoc, another option is to talk to the professor, and sometimes because you're in their lab, they'll still be willing to write it, but they'll just consult with the postdoc, and the postdoc will help write part of it and they'll co-sign, or they can just provide like sort of a short paragraph to a professor with like more information, so it's like they know you better. So it's worth talking to your PI about as well.
This question, I believe several of you have kind of like said the answer to it, but I'm just going to go ahead and read it off just for the, you know, for the attendees. Can you address what should be included in the broader impacts and intellectual merit portions of the research plan? How long should these sections be compared to the main body of your research plan, and how should they differ?
So I've seen all sorts of variations on successful applications. So I don't think that there's a single answer to that. I've seen successful applications where broader societal impact was very evident in the research statement, as well as in the sort of broader impact statement. You definitely need a broader impact statement to actually spell it out. But it's going to depend on what exactly is the broader impact. If, for example, you're working on a cure for cancer, then the broader impact is, you know, in a way self-evident. Similarly, the panel that I was on this spring, where, you know, some of the applications were for remediation of environmental contaminants. You know, this is obviously has societal impact. If your broader impacts also include outreach to underrepresented groups, to you know, underprivileged high schools, other kinds of things, then you would want to spend a bit more time in the broader impact statement, talking about how you would then key your research to some of those other activities. And in that regard, try and ensure that that builds upon your own experience, because it doesn't play well with reviewers if someone who has said nothing about ever having done anything by way of outreach suddenly declares that they're going to be, you know, spending 1 day a week doing outreach. kind of think, well, you've had lots of opportunity to do that in the past. Why haven't you? So, the section should be true to yourself and your past.
Mm-hmm. I definitely want to echo what Professor Doyle has said, and specifically about the research plan. What I have seen in a lot of the essays that I've gone over is that the broader impacts for the research can and oftentimes does include how are you going to impact the field? How is your contribution in that research plan going to impact the field as a whole? And so that's kind of like the broader impact of research. And then you can also include in there saying what you're going to do, maybe in your surrounding area, or maybe you're going to use this in some place where you know it's much needed. And to contrast that, I've seen that the broader impacts in the personal statement are oftentimes where the evidence of your previous outreach, your previous community engagement kind of sits. That's where it resides. And then you can obviously project your future plans that are more geared towards that in your personal statement if you'd like to as well.
Next question is there a preference given to applications proposing research that would be taken only in the US compared to proposals that include collaborations with other programs or take place in sites abroad?
I don't recall ever having reviewed any applications that involved an international location. So what I would say there is to carefully read the eligibility requirements. If NSF isn't concerned, if it's not prohibited in the NSF guidelines, I don't think the reviewers would give a hoot as to where the research was being done. I mean, we all work internationally.
I think I remember looking this up when I was writing my first NSF proposal, and I think I remember finding that, you don't quote me on this, but and yes, definitely do double check because the guidelines may have changed. But I do remember saying that they fund research at U.S. institutions. It is a U.S. funded program specifically for, yeah.
However, I will say that, there are many students at US institutions earning degrees from those institutions who might go and spend a few months in the lab of an international collaborator with their advisor to learn some skills, to learn how to use a piece of equipment that isn't in that institution. And I don't think anybody would be, concerned at all about that. Although, there are all of these sort of restrictions now on collaborations with certain countries. So do be pretty careful about what you might be specifying that you're doing.
And Professor Doyle, you were already kind of giving like this advice, but what are some of the biggest mistakes you've seen in applications as a reviewer?
I mean, the biggest mistake is to focus on a research plan and not provide insight into the applicant. Again, the reviewers are instructed to review the potential of the applicant to do research. not to opine on the viability, feasibility of the research itself. So that research plan is a vehicle for you to show who you are, what you're interested in, how you approach problems. So you will have taken other classes where the teachers told you that you need to show you're working. You need to show you're working on developing the research plan. So talk about why you're interested in a particular topic, why you are proposing to use a particular research approach as opposed to another, you know, and keep on coming back to you. And you can do this in a way that doesn't come across as being egotistical. The reviewers don't want to see sort of egos out there. You know, we see that in our politicians. We don't need egos in our future scientists and engineers. We want people who are interested in seeking the truth. Sorry, I couldn't resist that. Your reviewers are not going to be politicians, I can tell you that.
So as I had mentioned, a lot of you are all STEM-based in STEM-based fields, but an attendee is wondering if any of you can, if any of you have advice for providing a good research statement for someone in an anthropology when research is predominantly done, is more ethnographic.
That's, I guess, the closest to social science, unless you look like you want to jump in. Okay, so I'd imagine a lot of it, well, first of all, I think the best thing to do is to reach out to people in your department and get example letters or example proposals and read those. I think the other thing is a lot of it will probably be the same. There's still intellectual merit to the work. There's still the way it's advancing your field and our knowledge of your topic forward. And there's still broader impacts. So I think that a lot of that will be the same. And actually the portion of your, I mean, it's a very short proposal. So the portion dedicated to the methods is pretty small and pretty vague. So I would imagine that the framework is actually still pretty similar. I know that's vague, but maybe you could elaborate if there was a specific question you had. But I think laying out an idea, having a testable question, and then demonstrating that you know how to approach that question and that it has merit is probably more broadly applicable. And then the actual methods is, I had a very small section where I gave a very general idea of what I was going to do. So I think that a lot of it will probably transfer, but I would look at examples.
And then adding to that, you can still, you had to have had background information in whatever your field is to know what you're talking about and show that you have that, show that you've done research in that field or similar fields. At the end of the day, there's no difference.
Yeah, I think like my piece of advice would just be like focus on the research question and the story that you want to tell. I think that kind of translates across all the fields. And I remember in my proposal, I didn't split off like methodology. Like I just did the aims that were going to answer the broader question that I was interested in, with like the approach of doing, I will address this question by doing this. So I think regardless of the field that you're in, it's like focus on what your contribution is going to be to the field.
I'm gonna reframe this question, but for the current fellows, not the applicants, you guys aren't applicants anymore. That copy is wearing off. Did any of you use a template letter when communicating with potential letter writers?
Some of my advisors did ask for a template letter, and the way they worded that was they want to get a feel for the things that I'm going to touch on in my essay. And because I was involved with a lot of things with this advisor, it made sense to try and find a narrower scope to address in the LOR as well. And the way they explained this to me, why they were asking for this template, was that they want to make sure that they are corroborating the things that I'm saying, and that the things that they're talking about are just not out in left field, talking about something else completely, you know.
One of my recommenders did ask me for basically a list of accomplishments, and maybe that serves a similar purpose.
Usually what I send to letter writers are my updated CV. If you're applying to multiple fellowships, all of the fellowships with like kind of what they're trying to fund. And if you have your statements written, send that to them, kind of give them as much information that they can work with. Some of my letter of rec writers requested basically just a summary paragraph of what are your current research goals and what is the research you're highlighting in your proposal. And so I would say just send them a paragraph of that. If anything, they're including that paragraph in their letter of rec for you. But kind of what Alexander said, I was applying to multiple fellowships at the same time where they all kind of had a different twist. So I made sure to include a paragraph for like that fellowship specifically so that they didn't accidentally send the wrong letter that would like totally misalign with what you were saying. I also sent them very detailed specifications on what the format needed to be on the letter, because the NSF is super picky about margins and font size. And I think like they say you can get disqualified if any of that is not met. So make sure you are very explicit with what your letter of rec writers need to do.
And I reminded the professors writing it that the specifications could disqualify them because sometimes they see specifications and ignore specifications. So I highlighted it, and when I reminded them, I was like, and please again, make sure that it fits this format.
Yes, so certainly, just as the reviewers want to see authenticity in the application, they're usually pretty astute at recognizing if all of the letters sound the same. Normally the letters are going to sound totally different and authentic, and so don't draft letters for particular references, because they might even ask you to do it, but then they're all going to sound the same. If people ask for input, in addition to all of the advice you've heard, I would only go as far as to each reference spell out in bullets the points that you hope that they can make on the basis of their familiarity with them. And when I write letters for people, I always want to see, even if it's just a draft form, their own statements and so on. And I tell the student that, you know, I need to see what it is that you're writing so that I can support it and write something substantive and relevant.
So the next question comes from a second-year PhD student. So part of the eligibility, like this is your final year to apply to the NSF. The question is, what are some aspects I should keep in mind for this application, especially for the research statement?
So I'll start on that, because the way that the reviewers do their work is that, first of all, we are given the applications of undergraduates to review. And we have to rank them all, you know, give a number that is then normalized to each person to address grade inflation. And then when we've done all of the undergraduates, then we get the first year graduate students. And then when we've done all of them, we'll get the second year ones. And the order is so that we, you know, see the bar being raised in terms of familiarity with research and intellectual maturity. So a second year PhD student will be expected to have learned a lot and be demonstrating more sophisticated thinking, better knowledge of the field than somebody who's applying as an undergraduate. So the bar, so you're going to be judged against your peers. You're going to be compared with your peers. And so you need to show what you have already learned in graduate school.
Yeah, as a second-year applicant, I was told that my research statement mattered a little more in that capacity. Like I was expected to show a really, a sophisticated, thought-out plan, have a concept of what a 3 years worth of work would look like, and then if I'd already begun some of the work, which I had, then just not to give the results, but just sort of to mention that this is something you've already started to collect preliminary data on. You've already established this collaboration or something like that. And then also to echo that in your personal statement, where you can just sort of, as you're talking about sort of your research story and how you got there, you can tie in, I communicated this work at the conference, or then I communicated, or I've may have this publication, or if you don't have a publication, that's fine, but just show that you've been thinking about this for a while, and just sort of make sure that it's just sort of fleshed out a little more, and that the feasibility was important, and I should highlight why this was work that was feasible.
To kind of build off of what Willa said, I think there was a section in my research statement where I said why our lab specifically and the location was key for asking the question that I was asking, just to kind of show like our lab is suitable for this work. And also, if you did rotations in your first year, I kind of, in my personal statement, said how all of those skill sets were making me a good applicant to answer these questions.
We do have 8 minutes, so we're going to do a few more questions. The next one is, how does one narrow down a topic to discuss in the research proposals? What strategies did you all use when you were applying to the NSF?
For me, it definitely started with something that I was interested in, something that caught my eye. Just so happened I had done research in over the summer. So I kind of knew what was involved, what the days and nights would look like, and essentially what the feeling of it was like after I produced some results. And to me, that was something I had enjoyed. And so I started there and kind of did a sweep of central topic that surrounded that, a few branching topics. Picked one I really thought was really cool, and then talked about what work there could, I thought about what work could still be done in that field, or what things could be improved. And I just moved from there.
The next question is, if you include preliminary results in your research proposal, should it be in the form of a figure or only reference it in the text?
I could start that since I think I commented on it. Oops, sorry. I think there's a norm in different fields of a figure or not. I was told only to include a figure if you really couldn't explain a hypothesis or a logic through text, and that you should try to use your space for text. But I know that plenty of people have successfully included figures, especially in a lot of the STEM fields. But I think often they're to show a mechanism or a hypothesis, not a result. For results, I didn't present any actual results, but sort of I had a study, and then I had specific aims that I was going to address in that study. And I just, sort of commented that the aim 2 would be promising, or study 2 would be promising, because preliminary data already supported aim 1. I didn't go into details on the results. I don't know if other people got different advice.
I had a figure in my research statement, but when I went back and read it this morning, I realized the figure is doing nothing other than sitting there and looking very pretty on the page. So short of showing the reviewer that I can make a nice looking figure, I don't think my figure's doing much, but that's just my figure. And then to address the rest of the question, I have like one paragraph that is a little less than a quarter of a page that's actually discussing my past work. The large extent is future work and intellectual merit and broader impacts.
And then I kind of wanted to give the panel, do you guys have like any like last burning like advice? Like you really want the attendees to know this before like the workshop is over and done with? No?
Let me say that, to reiterate what I've said about making your application interesting. And the best way to do this is to show your enthusiasm. Reviewers want to feel that they're supporting somebody who is just raring to go with their research. And so often people tend to adopt a very dry writing style with technical work. Somehow they feel that technical work can't be fun to read and interesting. And don't fall into that trap. Don't write in the third person, write in the first person. This is about you, your interests, and don't be afraid to be enthusiastic. So have fun.
Yeah, I think to kind of build off of the have fun idea, I think once you kind of treat this as like a reflective exercise and as a time to be like, this is what I'm interested in, I think your attitude will change about writing it. And I think that'll really show in the application. As cliche as that sounds, it's like, I think you're able to notice when someone's really excited about their work and what they've done.
Well, we are in the last 2 minutes of the workshop. I do want to take the time to thank all the panelists. You know, now that we are, you know, in this remote Zoom university world, I'm really thankful that I was able to, you know, get you all to be part of this panel. I'm truly thankful, and I'm pretty sure the great collegiate advice that you have provided our attendees it's awesome. And I do want to thank the workshop attendees who, you know, are also in this, you know, the Zoom University environment with us. I do want to remind you all that this is being recorded. As soon as we're able to get the closed captioning set up, we will have this released to the campus. And also to the attendees, while we have great panelists, we also have great fellows just in general. So I'll be sharing a list of names and emails with fellows who were not able to be part of the panel. So feel free to reach out to them. We only selected 5 students from 5 specific disciplines, but I'm pretty sure you really want to reach out to those that are within your own discipline. And last thing, if you want, especially if you're an undergrad, if you're looking for guidance on how to reach out to the graduate student advisor to get access to those students that are NSF fellows, feel free to email us at gradfell, so that's GRADFELL @berkeley.edu. Thank you, everyone.
And good luck to everybody.
Yes.